All right. Hi, everyone, and we're just going to flow right into the sermon time. Just we live in a strange time right now, and I'll tell you, I was praying yesterday and the day before just about sermon today and kind of where we're at as a church, and we're going into the Christmas season and all the craziness that's going on around us, and God kind of threw this sermon at me pretty quick, and so I'm excited to share it with you. I think it's perfect for our church and where God is taking us, and so I think God is just grooming us, and I think God has been grooming us to be a church that makes a difference. I think so much of our lives and the society we live in is so self-focused, focused on ourselves. And that's not what God is all about. That's not what the church is about. And I think God has been grooming us to understand that a little more. And so I'm just going to jump into it. But today is actually the first day of Advent. We're going into the Christmas season. And we had Thanksgiving, and now we're going into the Christmas season. And Advent just basically means awaiting or expecting kind of the arrival, and it's tied into Jesus' birth, obviously. And it's there's 4 Sundays in Advent, so today would be the first Sunday in Advent, and it's something that Christians have done for 2,000 years, and it's just to prepare our hearts for the birth of Jesus, for Christmas and Christmas Eve. And in the past, we've given out kind of Advent devotionals, and we still have more of those. If you want those, let me know, and I can get you them. I could email you the devotional so you can have on your phone. Obviously, we're not meeting together today, so I can't hand them out to you, but I can get them to you somehow if you're interested in just kind of going through the Advent through that. But we're going into the Christmas season. And so if you have your Bibles, we're going to turn to Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. And this is the beginning of the Christmas story in the Scriptures. So Luke chapter 2. Matthew, Mark, Luke in the New Testament. Luke chapter 2. And we're going to read verses 1 through 7. And it says, "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria." And that's kind of a footnote, even in the Bible. And mine has parentheses. And why that's important, by the way, just these little details are important, is that's how we can date and get birth, what year it was, because we know who the governor was, we know who the Caesar was. It says, "Went to his own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him, and was expecting a child. Excuse me. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in the manger, because there was no room for them in the inn." So what do we got going on? So there's the Caesar, and he decides, hey, we're gonna have we're gonna have a census. We need to have a census, and they would have quite a few census back in those days. And basically, what a census was they just want to count all the people. I know we had a census in 2020 in the U.S. and want to make sure how many people are in what areas, and so they can give the resources to. But back then it was a little different. It wasn't about figuring out how many people are where so they can give resources. It was to make sure everyone was paying taxes to the Caesar. The whole deal that Caesar had going on, the whole Roman Empire cost a lot of money. And so with all the armies and just the games and building the great stadiums and all the things that they were doing took a lot of money. And so one of the things they wanted to do was make sure everyone in the empire was paying taxes, so they would have these census to count everyone, so they make sure everyone is giving their tax. Everyone was giving. So I think about just this time, and I shared with you guys I got a cold. In fact, I just got my results back right before we started, and they're negative for COVID. So I just got a cold, and I was sharing with some people on the Zoom earlier. That's good news, but on the other hand, who the heck gets a cold in the middle of all the craziness COVID stuff going on? I don't know. But bear with me with kind of my throat issues. So I think about that time. I think about the beginning of the Christmas story. This is where it all begins. To fulfill the prophecy, and Mary and Joseph, they go to Bethlehem because Jesus, the Messiah, was to be born in Bethlehem. And so this kind of kicks things off. And it says while they were there, the time came. So this is shortly after they arrived there. And we think it took about 7 days for them to get there. And so at some point while they're there, it doesn't say, the pageants and everything make it look nice because that she's like about to give birth, and they show up and it's raining and it's crazy and they get into the manger. That's probably not how it went. It took 7 days for them to get there, and they were probably there for a little while, and then finally it was time. But I try to picture that scene in Bethlehem in that time. And I think, man, it was a crazy time. There's a census. Because there's a census, there's crazy times. Like that city is overrun by people, and there's no room anywhere for people to stay. There's probably long lines, people waiting to get counted and to pay their taxes and to do all that stuff. And in the middle of all that chaos, in the middle of all that hectic world, comes Jesus. Comes this little baby. Comes the Messiah. And with him comes light. And with him comes hope. And so just see the visual there, the beauty of the scriptures, the beauty of how God ordained all this is in the middle of chaos. And by the way, it was darkness too, because no one likes giving taxes, and especially taxes to people who are governing over you, but not just governing over you. There were Romans who were oppressing the Jews. They had the boot of the empire was always on the neck of the Jewish people. And so within the chaos, within the darkness, is born hope and light in Jesus. And in John 1, verse 5, it says, this is my favorite Christmas story version. I know the traditional ones are in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but my favorite is in John. And in John 1 through 5, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." And here it goes. This is Jesus. "In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind." And I love this line, John 1:5. "Shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." That's Christmas. That the light was born in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of the darkness. This light, the light that gives life to all mankind, was born. And then John 8:12, Jesus himself affirmed this. This is Jesus grown up. He's 30 some odd years old, and he's doing his ministry. And in John 8:12, he tells everyone, it says, "When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, 'I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life.'" Again, Jesus is the light. And we just sang that song during worship. "Here I am to worship, light of the world. You step down into darkness." Because that's what Christmas is all about. And so just the craziness of the census, the darkness of the times, and the light and the hope being born in the midst of that. And so the census was about counting people. Counting numbers. So that's what everyone was thinking back then. It's the count, people moving all around, lines and counting of people. And that's the world we live in right now, don't we? I mean, that's what's going on in our minds, in our lives right now. That's why we're not in person today. That's why we're doing this online for today. It's because numbers and people is what's driving our lives right now. Specifically, the number of people who are testing positive for COVID. How many people have COVID is the question. And we look up on our phones and the news and Twitter and all that other stuff is the daily case, the daily cases. Here's the new daily cases today, and here's the new daily cases tomorrow, and we got the charts, and what's the transmission rate, and how many people are hospitalized today, and then what's that trend looking like? And so we live kind of in that world of craziness of people being counted. Right now we're counting people, but not a census, even though we had a census this year, but specifically counting the COVID cases. And yesterday, in fact, I shared with you, Joe and I went to go get tested just to be safe. And we went to Dodger Stadium because they're the biggest testing site. And we showed up there, and there was just thousands and thousands of cars lined up. And they had several different lanes, and everyone was going. And I couldn't help, as I'm standing in the middle of all these cars waiting in line, all these people waiting in line in their cars, I couldn't help but to think about Bethlehem in the time of Jesus' birth. I just thought, man, it must have been crazy like this. Now, I understand they weren't in cars. Maybe they all had their camels or donkeys or whatever they had. But just that chaos of people waiting in line, of people waiting to be counted, of people waiting to get checked. And I couldn't help but to think about the similarities between our time today and the census time back then that we read about. See, for them it was census created crazy times. Jesus was born. For us, it's not a census, it's COVID that has created these crazy times. But the same thing still remains, is that Jesus is still here. The light of the world is still in the midst of our chaos, in the midst of our craziness of our world, in the midst of the darkness in our world. The light is still there. And by the way, light and Christmas, they go hand in hand, don't they? Christmas lights. In fact, when we were on Zoom earlier, one asked is who's got their Christmas lights up already? And I think David and Barbie won because they've had it up for a long time. You can ask them on Zoom how long. But they've had it up for a long time. But I love Christmas lights. And just driving around and having my house, you guys know this, every year I try to go for the Griswold record. I just saw a commercial the other day where I think it was Geico. And the astronauts, this guy was doing his house, and the astronauts can see it from space. That's my goal, okay? That's my goal one day, to get to that space where you can see my Christmas lights from space. But I just love the lights. And why do we have lights for Christmas? To represent that Jesus was the light of the world. It's not just because it's pretty, it's not just because it's nice, but it's to represent that on Christmas we celebrate the light coming into the world, the light of the world being born. And with that light comes hope. That not only did light enter the world, but hope entered the world. Hope in the midst of darkness. And hope is an important deal. In fact, hope is talked about 200 times in the New Testament. And it's interesting, I think only one of those times is in the Gospels. Most occurrences of hope happens after Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension. It's almost like the gospel writers are saying, okay, now that Jesus has come, he died on the cross, he rose again, he resurrected, now we have hope. And in Romans 15:13, Paul says this, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. Let me read that again. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope. The Greek word for hope is elpis. Elpis. And what it really means is that an expectation or an anticipation of good. So hope is this anticipation that there's good coming my way. So hope is this idea that maybe there's not good going on right now. But there is good coming. And because there is good coming, I am not downcast in the present darkness, because I know good is coming to me. So there's this anticipation that good is coming at some point for me. So let's read Romans 15:13 with that definition of hope. So may the God of the anticipation of good fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in anticipation of good. There's this idea of there's anticipation of good coming our way. And then Romans 12:12, Paul says this, rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. We're in some tribulation right now. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Now, think about why we can do this. Remember, hope is about the future, right? Hope is that there is good coming to me at some point. And there's this anticipation of good. So let's he says, rejoice in hope. Rejoice in the fact that there's good coming to you at some point. Maybe not right now, but good is coming to you. Therefore, if we understand it that way, the next part makes sense. So be patient in tribulation. See, when we know good is coming to us, when we have hope, we can be patient because we know the good is coming. See, we're impatient when we don't know if good is coming. But when we know good is coming, we can be patient because we know it's coming. We've been promised it. And then he says, be constant in prayer. Why can I be constant in prayer? Because I know the good is coming. So I can be patient in the darkness because I know the light and the hope is coming. The good is coming. And I can be constant in prayer, praying for the good to come in because I know it's coming. So the idea of the future good coming, the hope, makes it so I can be patient in hard times, in darkness. Makes it so I can be constant in prayer during dark times and tribulation. And then let's take that same approach, this anticipation of good, as the definition of hope. And let's apply it to Jeremiah 29:11, one of the most known verses in the Bible and the most loved verses in the Bible. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not evil, to give you a future and a hope. You see how future and hope are tied in together there? So God says, for I know the plans I have for you. And plans is future. So I know the future I have for you, the things that are lined up for you in the future, God says. Plans for good and not evil, not bad. So these are good future plans coming for you. And because of that, it will give you a future and hope. Why does it give you a future and hope? Because hope is the anticipation of good. And God is saying here, I have plans that are good for your future. And that brings us hope. That I don't have to despair in the present darkness. I don't have to be downcast in the darkness. Because I know good is coming. It may not be good right now. In fact, it may be very, very bad right now. But I know good is coming. And this all points us back to the cross, doesn't it? Friday to Sunday. Now, Friday was not good. I know I'm going from Christmas to Easter, but bear with me. Friday was not good. But the anticipation was coming. And Sunday, good came. And throughout our lives, it's kind of a repetitive, this idea of Friday and Sunday, Friday and Sunday. We go through times of being in Fridays. And I would say right now in our world, we're in a Friday, or at least a Saturday. And we're expecting that Sunday to come. And that goes through our lives little by little, but that's kind of the big idea of our lives. That there's a Friday and there's a Saturday, and that lasts all our lives. On one day we too will be resurrected. And so the idea that there's this future that is good for us is the hope. That is what hope is. And that all started when Jesus was born. That all started when Jesus entered the world. It's that hope and that light, the light of Jesus, came during Christmas. And it's because of that light that we can have hope. Because light always brings hope. Light takes the darkness away and brings us hope. Like symbolic light, Jesus being the light of the world, and that brings hope, but physical, literal light brings us hope. You know, there's nothing better than walking into a dark room and hitting that light and boom, it's bright. And that's why I love Christmas time and Christmas lights. It just brings so much hope and joy. And so here's the deal. Jesus is the light. And because of the light, you and I, followers of Jesus, have hope. Because that's what light does. It brings hope. But also, you and I, who have this light, who have this hope, we are also called to shine that light and that hope to others. That we shine the light to others and therefore bring hope to others as well. Jesus in Matthew 5 He says this to us. Now remember, he declares in John 1, when he's born, it says the light has come into the world. And then then later on he says in John, I am the light of the world. And then in Matthew, this is what he tells us. This is what he tells you. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Somebody say amen. I can't hear you, but other people in the Zoom may see you. Give a thumbs up, whatever that looks like. But we are the light. We are the light. We are called to bring light into the world. Jesus brought light into our lives. And that light disperses the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. And because of that light, we have hope that there's a future good. And therefore, we can be patient in our current tribulations, and we can be constant in prayer. But we're also called to share that light with those who don't have it. And how many people in our world today need that light? How many people in your life today need that light and that hope? And guess who's called to bring it to them? You and I. We're called to be light. And that's kind of a, we studied Philippians earlier this year and last year. And one of my favorite parts in Philippians is in chapter 2 that we studied, that if we follow Jesus without grumbling or complaining, that we will shine like stars in the universe. I just love that idea that you and I are called to shine. And it reminds me of that old song. If you grew up in church, you remember, little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. You're welcome for that little singing, especially when I'm sick. I know it was incredible. But this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Because we're called to be lights in this world. There's a weird, obscure Christian band called Sleeping at Last, and they have this song called In the Embers. And I love that idea, in the embers, that there's this fire that's burning and these embers go out. But they talk about how our lives are to be those lights, and specifically like fireworks. And think about your life like a firework. And I'm going to read you some of the lyrics. It says, we live and we die. So basically we have a life. It doesn't last forever on this earth. We live and we die. Like fireworks, our legacies hide in the embers. So like the fireworks, they go and they explode. Those are the embers that you're seeing. And that's what's great. That's the legacy that firework leaves, is as it's burning, as it's lighting up. That's what it's all about. And it says, we live and we die. Like fireworks, our legacies hide in the embers. May our stories catch fire. Oh, I love that line, church. May our stories that we are followers of Jesus, may our lives catch fire and burn bright enough to catch God's eye. We live and we die. I can just talk for another hour or two just about those lines, that our stories, our lives are to be burning for God and to catch God's eyes and to light everything else around us. And then it goes into the chorus. It says, like fireworks, we pull apart the dark. We compete against the stars with all of our hearts. Till our temporary brilliance turn to ash, we pull apart the darkness while we can. I don't know who these people are, but I want to meet them one day because, man, these lyrics it's a sermon in and of itself. But we are to pull apart the dark. We live in a dark world. We live in a dark time in a dark world. And our job is to pull apart the dark with our light. Our light? No. The light of Jesus that is within us. We are to shine so bright that we pull apart the darkness. Remember, John said that the light has entered the world and the darkness cannot overcome it. That same light that cannot be overcome by darkness is in you and it's in me. And so we have a responsibility to use that light to pull apart the dark, to go into places in the times in the world where there's darkness and say, no, 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 no. There is a light that this darkness cannot even overcome, that even this darkness cannot overcome. It is a light that no darkness, no sickness, no pandemic, no epidemic, nothing can overcome. Here it is. Let me show it to you with my life. That's what our lives are called to be. See, there's two things that I want everyone to walk away with from this message. One, church, followers of Jesus, we have hope. We have hope. We have a future good. Because Jesus entered the world that we're celebrating through Christmas. By the way, did you notice our little Christmas? Here's our answer to, do we have Christmas, our house decorated? You're looking at it right here. This is all to the extent of our Christmas decorations so far. But don't worry, Clark Griswold is on the move. But we have hope because of Christmas, because Jesus entered the world, because the light entered the world. You and I, people who believe in Jesus, we have hope. A hope that no darkness can overcome. And so when we think about that during this time, during COVID, during this darkness in our world, probably a darkness that no one in our generations has ever experienced, we can still have hope. We can still persevere. We can still be patient in the tribulation. We don't have to let it get to us. We can be constant in prayer. We can remember we have a hope and a future. And so I hope, and my prayer is that everyone walks away from this message just thinking, in the midst of the worst pandemic that we have ever experienced, I have hope. I don't have to be downcast. I don't have to let this get to me. I have hope because I have the light of the world. And that light cannot be overcome with darkness. And then number two, my second hope that everyone walks away with, well, first, we have hope. Second, that we shine hope. We have hope and we shine hope. So we have hope. What does that mean for you? What does it mean for you that you have hope? What does it mean for you that you have the light of the world that no darkness can overcome in you right now? No matter how bad Corona is right now, no matter how bad it gets, what does it mean to you that you have a light inside of you, shining brightly, that no darkness can overcome? What does that mean to you? How does it affect your heart? Have you thought about that? Have you stopped to think, man, I got a light. Yeah, there's darkness all around me. Yeah, this stuff's crazy. Oh, they're talking about shutdowns again. They're doing this and we got a curfew. But I got a light inside. Have you thought about the light that you have inside of you? Well, what a perfect time to start. When you're seeing all the Christmas lights that represent the light of Jesus coming into the world, starting to go up all around you. Have you thought, how does this affect my attitude? How does knowing that Jesus is the light and that you have a future good coming to you and that can never be taken away, how does it affect your attitude right now in the midst of our darkness? Paul says that it all starts, our whole life starts with the renewing of our minds. And what he means by that is understanding the right things, understanding the truth. And the truth is, you have a light inside of you that can never be overcome by any darkness. You have a hope. You have a future good that can never be taken away. How does that affect your attitude today? How does it give you strength today? How does it help you rearrange your focus? How does it help you rearrange your focus, not on what's going on today, the darkness that's going on today, the evil that's going on today, but that I got good coming to me in the future. Oh, God has promised me good and He has never failed. And so I have good coming to me. How does it help you take your focus on the dark, off the darkness and on to the light and the hope that is in Jesus. The anticipation of good coming your way. And so we haven't thought about that. Even maybe you haven't thought about that since the pandemic started. Maybe you haven't thought about that right now. But even right now, as we're separated, right now as we're online, maybe that's what you need to think about right now. Maybe this message that God put on my heart the last 2 days, and it came quick and it came deliberate and it was clear, maybe it was for you. Because hey, you put on my heart, I'm the pastor of this church, you're this church, and so maybe it was just for you to take a moment, to take some time today, to talk to some people today about how the hope that you have in the light of the world, and that light is in you, and you are called to be that light, how that gives you hope today. And how it helps you change your focus and your attitude and your heart off of the darkness and the pain and the anxiety and the fear and all the stuff that's going on in our world today to the hope, the anticipation of good, the light. So we have hope. Number 2, we shine hope. So what does that look like for you? How can you do this? How can we do this? How do we shine hope right now? How do we shine our light right now? How can you shine hope to your family members? How can you shine hope to your friends? How can you shine hope to your neighbors? And by the way, people need hope right now. We all know this. I don't think you need me to tell you that. Just in our church yesterday, in our prayer group, came a prayer request from for a friend of a teenager in our church. A friend who was in the ER because she tried to commit suicide. That's only one story we know. There are many of those going around. I've said it the last 8 months. You've heard it. Depression, suicide rates, everything is going through the roof. People need hope. Why? Because people are looking at this present darkness. They're looking at all the negative stuff we're getting from the media, all the negative and fear tactics coming from Twitter and social media and regular media and everywhere you look. And because they don't have Jesus, all they see is darkness. They don't see the light. But you and I, we see the light. You and I, when we pass Christmas decorations, we don't see it just as some light bulbs. We see it as a reminder that there is a light that came into this world 2,000 years ago that was the life of mankind, and no darkness, no corona, no COVID can ever overcome it. We have that, they don't. So how can we be light to those people who don't have it? How can we shine that hope to those people who desperately need it? How can you bring light and hope to someone this season? You know, so many times, like I said in the beginning, our culture is so focused on us. I shared this with Joe the other day. I said, when we hear that someone in our community has COVID, is our first response, oh no, was I around them? Or is our first response, are they okay? That's a tough question. Because if we say, oh, was I around them? Who's our first concern? It's a selfish concern. And I think it's time for Christians to stop being selfish. The world desperately needs us to stop being selfish. See, everyone is hunkered down in their homes and we're all protecting ourselves. But that's not the time for that anymore. Yes, we can be safe. We're being safe today by not meeting together. Yes, we can be wise. But our general attitude cannot be just for our own safety. And so, what does it look like for us, for you, to shine hope into someone this season? Someone who you do not know if they're on the brink of depression, if they're on the brink of suicide. Someone who all they see right now is darkness, and they need the light of Jesus right now. What does it look like for you and I to give people our hope, to give them our light? Jesus says, you are the light of the world. No one puts a light under a bowl, but puts it on a stand so it gives light to everyone in the house. Now here's the deal. He doesn't say, go light everyone else's lamp, because not everyone had a lamp. Not everyone has Jesus. He didn't say, go light everyone else's lamp so they have their own little lamp. He says, no, you let your light shine on to them, and your light gives light to the entire house. The people in our lives who aren't believers, who aren't followers of Jesus, they don't have a lamp. The only light that they can that is accessible to them to push away the darkness in their lives right now is you. Your light. Jesus' light in you. What does it look like to let your light shine on them right now? What does it look like to keep them anchored right now? What does it look like to help them see it's going to be okay? Maybe it's just calling them every day and talking to them. Maybe it's checking up on them. Maybe it's going and knocking on their door and having a conversation with them. Maybe it's bringing them food. Maybe it's sharing the messages you're hearing at church. Maybe it's sharing the hope that you have about Jesus. Oh, Brom, I don't know enough scriptures. I don't know. I'm not telling you to go share with them scriptures. Share with them the hope that you have. Share with them why the this darkness isn't consuming you like it is them. Share with them because you have a future hope that is available to everybody, including them. This is not a time, church, this is not a time to say, oh, I don't know enough, or I'm worried. This is desperate, dark times. And we need to share our light. And if that means we sound weird Christian, we're weird because we're talking about Jesus, then let it be that. But it's dark times, and there needs to be light. And we are called to shine our light. We are called to share that hope with them. And here's the deal, church. Dealing with times of darkness and epidemics specifically is nothing new to Christianity. See, throughout our world since Jesus, there's been lots of pandemics. There's been lots of epidemics. And Christians have always shone bright through it all. Now, I want to give you a couple examples. I pulled up a couple articles of historical articles of Christianity and how Christians have shined the light of Jesus in the midst of the darkest times, in the midst of pandemics in the past. I'm going to read you some of them, if my throat lets me. This author wrote, the Christian response to plagues begins with some of Jesus' most famous teachings. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then this, that he should lay down his life for his friends. Put plainly, the Christian ethic in a time of plague considers that our own life must always be regarded as less important than that of our neighbor. That's where shining our light begins. During plague periods in the Roman Empire, Christians made a name for themselves. So Christians rose up during that time. Historians have suggested that the terrible Antonine plague of the 2nd century, which might have killed off a quarter of the Roman Empire, historians believe, led to the spread of Christianity. As Christians cared for the sick and offered a spiritual model whereby plagues were not the work of an angry and mad God, but the product of a broken creation in revolt against a loving God. And then he says, but the more famous epidemic is the plague of Cyprian, named for a bishop who gave a colorful account of the disease in his sermons. Probably a disease related to Ebola, the plague of Cyprian helped set off the crisis of the 3rd century in the Roman world. So this plague was so terrible, it was another crisis. And it kind of, if you look back through our history, it seems like every 100 years, there is a plague, there is some sort of epidemic, there is some kind of virus that goes crazy. And for us, it's no different. 1918 was the Spanish flu, and we can keep going back to the Black Plague and the Black Death and so on and so on. We can keep going back. But it seems like every 100 years, and it seems like throughout history, every time one of those has happened, Christians have rose up to the challenge and shined light and shined hope. So this plague of Cyprian set off this crisis of the 3rd century in the Roman world. And it says, but it did something else too, he writes. It triggered the explosive growth of Christianity. Cyprian's sermons told Christians not to grieve for plague victims who live in heaven, but to redouble efforts to care for the living. See, a lot of people at that time, they were just so, they'd lost a loved one, they've lost a friend, and they were just downcast because of that, and they were depressed. And this Christian guy, this pastor would tell them, don't spend your time grieving over those who are with Jesus. They're with Jesus, they're good. But let's spend our time and energy caring for those who are still alive, who are sick, who need the light, who need the hope today. It says his fellow bishop, Dionysius, described how Christians, heedless of danger, took charge of the sick, attending to their every need. In times of darkness, in times of plague, Christians always shine their light. And they care for those who need it the most, those who don't have Jesus. Another historian writes, nor was it just Christians who noted this reaction of Christians to the plague. Excuse me. A century later, the actively pagan Emperor Julian would complain bitterly, get this, of how the Christians would care for even non-Christian sick people. He would complain that Christians were caring for non-Christian sick people. While the church historian Pontanus recounts how Christians ensured that good was done to all men, not merely to the household of faith. The sociologist and religious demographer Rodney Stark claims, get this, so this is a historian, demographer, he says this, death rates in cities during this plague, death rates in cities with Christian communities were just half cities. That gives me chills. What an awesome legacy that is. That these historians would look around and they would look at these cities and there's this plague, there's this epidemic, there's this virus going around, and they would say, in these cities, the death rate was half, but in these cities, it's much worse, it's double than those cities. What do these cities that all had half death rates have in common? There were Christians there. And what were the Christians doing? They were holding on to their hope. They were shining that hope onto others. How were they shining that hope? By caring for the sick, by spreading the message of Jesus, by giving people hope, telling them there's a future, to everything you and I can do right now in this epidemic. Church, that's the legacy of the church. That in every pandemic, in every time of darkness in our world, Christians have shown the light of Jesus. And as we begin the Christmas season, where we celebrate the light of the world coming into this world, and we put up lights all over the place to remind us of that, man, I can't think of a better way to start this season by thinking about the legacy of the church during dark times, so we can apply it to our dark times right now by shining the light of Jesus. How? Number one, remembering we have hope, and making sure our focus is on the light. Our focus is on the hope, the anticipated good coming to us, and not the present darkness going on around us. And number two, shining that hope onto others, helping others, reaching out to others, loving others, putting others before ourselves by taking them food, by sharing the hope of Jesus with them, by sharing the gospel with them. Many ways. But that's our legacy as a church, as the church of Jesus Christ. The question is this tiny part of the church in the year 2020, in this pandemic, are we going to follow along with that same deal? Or are we just going to be about ourselves? Are we just going to hold on to listing passes through? Are we going to be worried about locked in? Are we going to be worried about that we can't go out? Is it all going to be we, me, I? Or are we going to be the church of Jesus who says no? Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. We'll see. But that's our challenge. That's our calling. That's our mandate. I want to give you a couple more verses as we wrap up here. 1 John 2:8. John says, "Yet I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in him and in you." So the truth, the light, is seen in him and in you because you are his followers. He says this, "Because the darkness is passing and the true light is already shining." Oh, what a verse for our time, right? It says the truth is seen in him and in you. Because the darkness, we're in darkness, but he says the darkness is passing. And the true light is not going to come already shining. Through who? Which light? Jesus' light. But Jesus isn't here. He's in heaven. So how is that light shining? Look in the mirror. You and I. The darkness is already passing, and the true light is already shining through his people. And then you've heard me say this verse over and over again. I think it's always good to remember that future good that we have. The ultimate future good. I think there's future good in our lives throughout our lives, but then there's an ultimate future good for everybody. And that's Revelation 21, 3 through 4. So we want to talk about why we have hope. Ultimately, this is why we have hope. This is one of the reasons we have ultimate hope, no matter how bad or dark it gets. Revelation 21, 3 through 4. John says, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now amongst the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.'" That's the hope that we have. It's the anticipated good that's coming to us. What's the good? That God will wipe away every tear from our eyes. There will be no more death, no more mourning or crying or pain or sickness or coronavirus or cold or flu or cancer or you name it. There'll be no more. And we will live with him in that state of no more mourning, no more death, no more sadness, forever and ever and ever and ever. And that is what the Christmas story is all about. That light, and by the way, we didn't get into it, but in Revelation 21, 22, it talks about that we will not even need a sun anymore because the light of Jesus will shine so bright that it will brighten up everything. And that light started on the Christmas story. That light started in Bethlehem when Jesus was born. And that's what Christmas is all about. So as we enter the Christmas season, as we see the lights, two things. One, we have hope. No matter what's going on around us, we have hope. And two, we are called to shine that hope onto others. And so, my hope for you is that you would really take these two things in today and spend some time today, maybe talking about it with some brothers or sisters, maybe pondering it, maybe praying about it, and just spend some time this week thinking about those two things. Now, where's your hope? Are you focusing on the right things? Are you focusing on the anticipated good? Or are you getting caught up in the darkness all around? Is your focus on the light of Jesus? And then two, how can you share that hope with others that are all around you, that need it desperately? And my hope is that every time you see a Christmas light, wherever, a Christmas candle, any light, anywhere, that you would be reminded that Jesus is the light. And that light, darkness can never overcome. And that light that can never be overcome by darkness lives in you and can never be taken away. Let's pray.